Alrighty, we are back for another weekly guest interview of Living a Bold Life. And this week I have got Declan, and Declan, is it Declan Berndt? Is that how you say it?
If you were in Germany, you would say probably close to what you said, but in America, we'll just say burnt, like burnt toast.
Okay. So I'm glad I asked. So depending on where we are is depending on how we would say your last name. So we'll say Berndt since we are in America right now.
Let's do that.
All right. So we are here with Declan Berndt today. And if you are returning to watch another one of these, thank you for coming back for more. You've probably gotten the gist that the fun of these interviews is that it really sheds light, I think, on some of the things that we all tend to be doing, those of us who are living a quote unquote bold life, but you're also getting to see the nuances because in the same breath, we are different beings. We're not all the same. And so it's, again, if you're hearing like living a bold life and you're like, what does that mean? I love it because most of the people I ask, well, not most, but many are like, I don't know if my life is bold enough to say yes. And so living a bold life is really whatever you say it is. But these are people that I encounter that I see showing up, putting in the work, making moves, trying to see how they live their best selves. And what you find in these episodes is sometimes living a bold life is making huge, grandiose leaps. And sometimes it's the smaller stuff. Like I joke, like I'm an introvert, right? I'm feeling super introverted this week. So for me, living a bold life is actually leaning into the life I created with all these interviews and all this stuff to do, when really I'm like, let's go read books in the corner. So maybe that's living a bold life, right? And so wherever you're watching this, you will have ways that you can connect to Declan, follow Declan, reach out to Declan. But just to give you a little snippet about who this gentleman is with us. Declan believes there is a wild brilliance within every person. I love that. He writes to remind others of their brilliance and shares tales from his journey into the light. A lover of kitchen floor dance parties, driving in new cities at night, and Converse high tops, Declan finds peace in learning to slow down, breathe, and be present. And that last little snippet right there, I think particularly in all culture, seeking peace and learning how to slow down, breathe, and be present, that's pretty damn bold. That's pretty damn bold.
Sure, I'll take it.
Not what we're being modeled, not really the revving that a lot of our nervous systems have been given. So I love that in your intro, you're already going against the grain. It's so good to be with you today. Thank you for saying yes.
Thank you, Jen. Thanks for having me. I'm stoked to be here.
And so you all remember, we're just going to hear a snippet, and I never know what anyone is going to share. And everyone is very generous. So I know that whether you're here to watch all of this or maybe just a little bit, you're going to get exactly what you need to take out and start playing with. And so, Declan, you may have come with an idea of what you wanted to say. You may completely shift gears in the moment. That is A-okay. You can have space for your thoughts. Just because we're live doesn't mean you have to be on it. So take care of you. And in this moment, when you look at one of the boldest moves that you have made on your journey, what is the one that you feel called to share today?
It was a great question. I'm glad I got thinking about that throughout these past little while. Really gave me the opportunity to dive into some of the things that I've done in the past throughout my life and take inventory and even dive a little bit deeper than that and explore some of the motivations behind some of these things that happened. And so having said that, I do feel I feel more inclined to share something that's more present for me now, rather than going back to something that's probably more shocking or grandiose, as you said. As an example, I want to speak to something that's happening now. It's very real to me. So
Yeah,
I'm going to
I
talk
love
about,
that.
yeah, I'm going to talk about me sort of stepping into finding my voice as a writer, and
Mm,
what that's meant as far as putting my voice out there into the world. And there's a writing program that I belong to, and one of the phrases in there is practice in public. And
mm.
so I feel like in the last several months, I have been beginning to practice in public as far as putting my voice out there in my writing. And most significantly, a couple of weeks ago, I put my first blog post out, and it got picked up, published by an online publisher. And that for me was a big step. That did feel like a bold move. Very exciting nonetheless. And yeah, it does feel vulnerable sometimes. You know, when you're bold, you put yourself out there. Particularly the content for this particular blog post the title was "The Unedited Truth About Surviving Divorce," and
Mm.
that's me speaking to my process that I'm in right now as I work through this process that I'm in. And so, absolutely, that felt like a bold move to put that out there and say, you know, this is what has happened to me, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I love that. Like that, the goal that I'm really taking is it's finding your voice as a writer. I love how you said that because I feel like that's one of those things where the mastery of that is going to be within practicing it. Just like transformation, right? Keeps evolving. So can your writing. And I love how you said leaning in. We use the word leaning in a lot around here because I think very often what's modeled is, jumping off the cliff.
Right.
And very often we get to where we get because we're leaning in.
Hmm.
Um, Practicing in public. You've been doing a lot of that lately. I follow you on Instagram, so I've seen you put stuff out there. And congratulations. I don't know if you can see it on your phone. I made the little cheer sign up on the
Oh,
corner of the
cool.
screen when you
Yeah.
shared that. And it is vulnerable. And I love that you said that, right? Because putting yourself out there as a writer can feel like jumping off a cliff. I remember when I published my very first blog post on my very first website, every fiber of my being when I was done was like, oh my gosh, I would like to take that back. What are people going to think of me? I don't want to check my inbox. I was freaky. So congratulations and thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And so for anyone who is thinking like, oh, I would like to read some of this writing, because again, too, what you're sharing about Declan, like the divorce and whatnot, I love it because you're very traditionally stuff like this is shared by people who maybe identify as women or something of that. And so and I don't want to just say women because it could be, we've got the gender neutrality now too. So I want to be mindful of that. But very traditionally, a lot of the super vulnerable shares, it has been reserved a lot for women, people who identify as women. And so I think sometimes it can be even more vulnerable as a man to put that stuff out there. So thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with what you're saying.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so thank you for doing that. It's huge. So y'all, if you're wanting to read any of that, again, I'm gonna have how you can follow Declan. He writes beautiful poetry on Instagram. Is where I follow. But sounds as though you're just getting started. So we know there's going to be more coming from you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like, one of the metaphors I like to use is living at my edge.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you get to the edge of the cliff and you kind of look down, but you want to stay grounded on that piece of land. But as you get closer to the edge actually kind of grows and keeps going. So I
Yeah.
absolutely foresee some even more outlandishly bold things coming up in the next few months. So I'm very excited for that.
Awesome. That's exciting. So when push came to shove, and again, these questions may not apply exactly the way they're worded, so just kind of improvise as always. But for most of us, when we go to make that move, whether it's like, I'm really going to find my voice as a writer, I'm really going to lean in, I'm going to put that post up there. Very often, there can be kind of like that push comes to shove, whether it's a conversation we're having with ourselves, whether it's an event that happens, But for most of us, there's something that's going on to where we're like, now's the time. I
Mhm.
must do this. For
Yeah.
you, has there been anything like that where it's like, now's the time, I'm ready, I'm gonna do this now?
I love that question. Absolutely. So when I was taking inventory over my life's bold moves, I actually began to notice the patterns looking back. And I'll
Mm,
bring this full circle in a second. But many times, when I was younger, I almost took these bold moves out of a position of lack or a place of force. Like I'm going to
mm,
force myself to do this thing because I don't feel like I'm good enough where I'm at. So I'm going to just force myself to do it. And look, I'm not saying that's bad or good. That just is what it is.
right.
But as I've sort of tracked my journey over time, I've seen those motivations change and morph as I change and grow. And as I speak specifically to this blog post, I think I've come into a place now, perhaps for the first time, where it feels less like force
Mm,
and more like flow. And so, how that translates for me is it didn't really come about as a single moment of, oh boy, you better damn well do this thing.
mhm.
Um, it more came back, more gradual than that, more organic than that, more fluid than that. And it felt like something I just was natural. It had to be the next step. So that's the best way I can describe it. It's just an inclination as I come more in touch with myself and what flow really feels like.
Yeah, I'm noticing more and more guests as of late are speaking to that piece, which I love because my life purpose is flow. So I love that. And I really, really love the introspection. Um, Noticing that your former bold moves came from a lot of patterns, you know, very, very often as a coach, what I have found, and this makes sense, right? We don't even get taught how to set goals in school. Like this is craziness. And so we think it's so simple. And so I'll get clients who want to set goals, and I'm like, no, I don't want to support you with that. And the reason is it's all about fixing yourself. It's all about you not being good enough. And quite frankly, that's just going to reinforce that shitty story. And that's not why people hire me. People hire me to bust that story up and throw it away. And so, I can't support a goal that's going to make that story bigger. And that is often where bold moves come from, goals come from. So I love that you saw that. And I love that you're starting to kind of feel, and for those of you who are listening who can't feel it, it's a practice, but you can feel force versus flow in your being. You can feel it in your world, you can feel it in your circumstances. And it sounds like for you, Declan, for this juncture of your journey, you're in a space now where it's not so much about like, oh, I have to make it happen by this day. Maybe it's like, maybe in another week, I'm going to kind of let it take its time a little bit, kind of get into some kind of a groove, a flow. And it's not like you're just sitting on the sidelines, like not in it, but you're just kind of noticing more of the energy and how you can work with it, it sounds like.
Definitely. I feel like a byproduct of becoming more in touch with that intuition inside of you is becoming less attached to the outcome
Mm,
or the specific end goal, as you mentioned. So I do have some goals out there, and I think intention and goal setting is important, but I'm actually going to prioritize what's present for me now. And if I need to rest, for example, my body, and I don't really feel like writing tonight, that feels like what I'm present to, I'm just not going to do it. And then you bet your ass tomorrow when I come back to write and I do feel present to that, it's going to come with even more power and intention.
yeah, I love that. So y'all, intuition versus result. And it's not saying we don't care about the result. It's just saying that's not what we're going to focus on.
Yeah.
And I'm the same, Declan, like I had to do a lot of work around, anything for my business. If I force myself to do it, nothing comes back. And if I just wait till I'm in the better zone, things come back. And so then it's like, okay, not only did I just wear myself out forcing myself to do it, it didn't yield anything.
Right.
So if we just
Right.
wait till we feel like it, one, we don't wear ourselves out, and two, we actually get more back.
Totally.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to go around that mountain 155 times before we finally say, okay, I'll just try to flow here. I'll just surrender to this process.
Yep, y'all. And like Declan is saying, it's a process, right? Like I literally just had a conversation with my spiritual mentor, where it's constantly about me continuing to honor my biorhythms and find new energetic ways to create. And so it's a conversation, particularly if you're watching and you've been a busy person, you've been an overachiever, you know how to get shit done. That's going to be practice for us.
Right.
we're recovering, shall we say? We're recovering. Yeah, I love that, Declan. More flow versus force, and it really is in the intuition. So you all, that's kind of notice. Notice if you're focusing on end result or intuition, and maybe try to get back to intuition. And so, Declan, for this next question, again, take it however you will. But for many people that have been well, for all people that have been on here, living a bold life is kind of something where it's also a practice. And when most of us start, we kind of keep at it. And for most of us, the word formula might not land with you, but for most of us, there's something we notice where, okay, to keep getting up, to keep aiming to be my best self, to keep aiming to make an impact, to keep showing up, there's things that I know I must do for myself. For some people, there's a very strict regimen of things. For some people, it changes seasonally. But for most of us, there are things that we need to do for ourselves in order to keep living this kind of lifestyle. So for you, have you found are there any things where I've got to do these things for myself? They matter, they make a difference.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I find that the consistency of those things is very much the seedbed that you can build that practice from. But absolutely, I do have a couple of daily practices that I do that I really rely on to reset my nervous system and be able to approach something in balanced ways. But I will speak to three components because we've been talking a lot about flow.
Yeah.
So when I think about flow, I think about space, I think about fluidity,
Yeah.
I think about intuition. And so even within our practice, I want to at least have that space to be able to flow in the different ways that, for example, my body might want to move or I might want to meditate that day. So loosely speaking, I will rely on meditation is number one. Number two would be movement. And number three would be nature.
Mm.
And so I feel like with those components, I do have a daily practice where I do in the morning. It's very condensed and short, so that I can fit it into my schedule no matter what's happening during that day with kids, etc. So I'll do a walk, meditation, and some yoga. It takes about 15 minutes before I go to my desk and start working.
Yep.
And even in that space, you can see that there's the meditative part, there's the movement part,
Yep.
and there's the nature part because I get outside when I walk.
Mm-hmm.
Another one of the practices that I do most weekdays is I'll head outside for a walk, also about a 15, 20-minute thing, into nature. I do some, I don't know if you've heard of energetic tapping, Nick Ortner stuff.
Yep.
Meridian. Yeah, I do some of that sometimes. Mostly take my shoes off and just walk back to the apartment with my bare feet. So just a lot of visceral experience with nature in that space. By the time I get back to my apartment 20 minutes later, I feel reset. Yeah. So those are some of the things I do on a daily basis. But as far as then I can get more creative as far as how I feel using that space in my day to maybe meditate at night, something extended or some visualization. I belong to this really cool fitness studio that have a range of classes. So I might go to cardio, dance, or kickboxing, yoga, different type of things depending on how I feel on that day.
That's awesome. And I love that you started with consistency being key. Because, I feel like, especially as someone with my background, I've got a lot of knowledge about nervous system stuff, and far too often what I see is people only choosing to use the stuff when they need it. And the nervous system just doesn't work like that. It needs consistency, right? Like if we have a really strong reaction, it's like, okay, that's built up stuff, right? Very often, not always, but consistency matters. Meditating, moving, and nature. So you all, like, as you heard that, I hope there's no overwhelm coming, because Declan also shared a way to make it very winnable. He plays a game he can win at. Short and workable. Very often we're not reliable to practice these things because we don't create games we can win at. We set up elaborate 3-hour plans. No. If you ever do that, let it be in addition to like your baseline, right? Because you don't need more than what you just shared. You really don't. And on days where you do, you can choose that, right? It's not an obligation. And so I love that it's short and workable in the morning. I am a firm believer that the morning space sets your pace. And if your morning is insane, your day is probably going to be insane. Sometimes we can recover from that shit, but for a lot of us, it's hard to do. We don't know how to interrupt the pattern we get stuck in. And so the whole day goes off the rails. So y'all meditating, it's that time for the stillness, right? Moving, it moves energy. It just shakes it up. And nature is just transformative. I love that you also shared tapping. Y'all, this has come up on the show before. You can look up EFT, you can look up tapping, you can look up anything like that. And then what Declan had mentioned about walking with bare feet, that's actually called earthing. And so if anyone's interested in more of that, you can look up the term called earthing. But super, super winnable game. And I love that you shared that. Because really that's what it boils down to. It's like, well, no kidding, you're not doing that. Who's got time for that?
Right.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it also sounds like, too, where you chose to purchase a membership has a lot of different offerings for you. So it's not like, okay, it's yoga only, it's kickboxing only. You've got a place that really honors your biorhythms. So Absolutely. If you want different types of workouts, you can get them.
Yes. Yeah. Very key for me. I like moving. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you all, that might be something too. It might be like, not having one pass only to one place that does something, or maybe it's looking at breaking them up. Where do you go, Declan, in case anyone's looking?
Yeah, it's called Block Fitness, BLOC.
I don't think I've heard of that.
It's in Camp North End.
Yeah, okay. If anyone watching is from Charlotte, Camp North End is very fun. Shopping, dining, music, working out now, we know. Lots of cool stuff. Absolutely. So I love that. A game that you can win at for sure. So Declan, for this next question, most of us aren't psychics. Maybe some people that I have on are, but most of us aren't. So for you, we're just kind of being hypothetical here. But if you can just imagine in your present space, you did not choose to start leaning in to find your voice as a writer. You did not choose to practice in public. You did not choose to put this blog post out and be vulnerable. Where do you sense you'd be within this same conversation if you were like, nah, I don't think I'm going to do that? What do you think would be going on right now? To the best of your hypothesizing.
Yeah, no, I have to get a little philosophical on this one, since I truly believe that we create the situations around us that we need to heal, to grow, and to expand. And so oftentimes, like we said before, we're going to go around the same mountain 50 times before we realize we don't need to. We can climb it or do whatever the rest of the metaphor says. So I feel like, yes, I was ready to say yes and surrender to this process of I'm going to slow down. I'm going to learn what flow feels like. And that means I've had to be really patient, Jen, over the last several months. I wanted to dive into all kinds of stuff as I went through the divorce and all that. But really learning how to be patient was me saying yes to my intuitive self, to my essence self. So if I hadn't made the decision to do that route, and look, I've been training, I'd say for 3 years, I've been practicing and learning things to the point where this was what I was training for, this very challenging process that I went through. But had I not made the decision to begin opening up in that way, I might have closed again for a while, and then life would have offered me another opportunity to open again. And so really the trick is, I think, in that space, because we've all done that, is to be kind to yourself when you do choose to close, and, you know, be thankful when another thing comes that you can open to a new opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. And you all, this can be a pretty elevated conversation of trusting that we create situations that we need to heal. You know, it's kind of taking where you are down in humanity and climbing up some ladders and looking down. It can be very hard in the moment when you're in a shitty situation, and that's just a label, right? But it can be hard to understand that maybe on some level you created it. But when you start looking, you'll start noticing. And I can look back now at any of the horrific events that have happened that I couldn't understand why, totally in service of me.
Right.
I love that you said that. It's a curious place to be. And so for you to actually choose this, you had to slow down, you had to be patient, you had to say yes to intuition. And it sounds like for you, had you not made this bold move, life would be okay. You would still be Declan. You'd still be living a bold life. You'd still be doing great. You would have just been in a scenario of, I'm choosing to close right now and not say yes. And that's okay. And I love this piece, Cheryl. So listen very carefully. And that's okay, because there will be another opportunity again. And I think, you know, we are so often like, I made the right choice. I made the wrong choice. Oh no, that's never going to happen again. And it's just not true.
Right.
If I believe, and this is what I'm getting from what you shared, if it is part of our journey, if it is meant to be for us, it is going to come up into our space again. And we're going to be able to say, you know what? This aligns now.
Right.
I'm ready for this now.
Right.
I'm going to now choose to find my voice as a writer, lean in and be vulnerable.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So for you,
but I
it
will
wasn't
say
just
that,
like, oh, it's lost forever. It was just, when do I want to, almost like you're at the store shopping. When do I want to buy this lovely merchandise?
right. No, it is like that. But I do think there are some natural consequences as we close ourselves off to
Sure.
what life throws at us, as in terms of things we can grow into. And sometimes we can create our own suffering that way. We might, like that mountain analogy, we might force ourselves to go around all over again. That can be an arduous journey.
Yeah.
So, you know, as your mind shift begins to change, to say, well, this is an opportunity. This thing is happening for me, and I can choose to open right now. That's my power. We can quiet the suffering. We can step into more wholeness, and that's really awesome.
Yeah, I love that. So you all, you know, it's a practice to notice when closing down, I think, is a recharge, and when closing down is something different, right? Like I'm not, I wouldn't say by any means I'm shut down over here, but I just noticed like, wow, I have been really tired lately. Wow, I've been sleeping like 10, 11 hours a night and I still want more. And so, you know, fortunately, because I have healers and people who support me, they've all been mirroring back like, oh no, you're in a time of your system is doing something. Slow down, close down, let it recirculate for a couple of weeks and trust that. And just knowing that it's normal is so helpful. So you all, if there's stuff that you want to be doing and you sense it's time to rest, take a week or two. It's okay. You know, sometimes we're birthing things and we're receiving downloads, and you might not know what's going on, but what your system really needs is sleep, water, food, naps, books, right?
Exactly. Well said.
And
Very
it can be
good.
hard to tell the difference. And so, if it helps anyone to know, I'm still practicing. Declan, are you still practicing?
Oh yes, practicing and napping and sleeping all at the same time.
Yeah, and y'all, it was, I had a lot of you probably know that I have an amazing woman who does Reiki for me, astrology, tarot. And what came up in the read yesterday, and I knew it was going to come, was you might be feeling tired lately. You're in what I would call a birthing process. And I already knew that, y'all. But what I'm getting at is make room for people who will give you permission to honor that. Because when we can normalize that, it's a lot easier.
Absolutely.
It's a lot easier.
Yeah.
I still get those parts that are like, you should be doing more. And I'm like, oh no, the should word, right? Like
Right.
sometimes your gremlins don't want to let you have that rest. Have you found that for you?
Absolutely. And the key word there that you mentioned is permission.
Yeah.
I think if we have that awareness for ourselves and say, I give myself permission to watch 3 Netflix episodes and binge for tonight, you
That
can
was my
just
Saturday.
well, good for you. You can just fall into that, and there's no guilt. There's no resistance there. But if your intuition's saying, actually, no, that's not where you should be tonight. You should be doing something else. That's a different conversation.
Yeah, yeah. And y'all, especially if you're a busybody and you're usually really energetic and you're feeling tired and restful, just notice, like, that's a tell for you. If you're normally like really like, I was going to use a phrase and I'm like, that might not be appropriate right now. We'll just put that back in. But, for me, I always laugh because I'm like, you are like such a doer. Like you always want to be producing. And so when I don't, it's something to notice and be okay with. So I hope you're getting permission for that. Because Declan needed to slow down, be patient, and say yes to intuition. And sometimes you can't get better at that unless you do close down.
Yes.
A lot of times that is what is in the closing down.
Yes.
Yeah. So I love that you shared that. And so once again, as we get to the final question, like every guest who's ever been on here, you have shared a wealth of ideas, of tips, of permission giving, so people can see you as their mirror, right? Because we're such mirrors. When we can't see it often for ourselves, we can see someone else and say, oh, there that is. So you may feel called to reiterate something you've already said, or you may feel called to share something brand new. But if you were going to go out and leave these amazing, there goes my pen, these amazing beings who have held space for this conversation, who will continue holding space for this conversation, is there one last piece of sage wisdom that you really feel called to drive home in this moment?
Yes, and it really does fit into a lot of what we've talked about already.
Mm-hmm.
It's a popularized statement, so I'm sure you've heard it before, Jen, but the statement is, life is happening for you, not to you.
Love.
And it really epitomizes what we've been talking about as we take ownership for our own selves, our own intuition, and our own leadership of ourselves. And if you see life as happening for you, you can see something like a divorce and say, wow, that's a beautiful thing that's happened to me. It's devastating in many ways, but that is a way that can lead me into greater expansion and greater understanding of love.
Yeah, I love that. So this can be a powerful one to write down. Put it somewhere you can see it. Life is happening for you, not to you. And Declan, I love that you shared a personal experience that's going on for you. Because very often I feel like, divorce, car accident, whatever it is, right? And I share car accident because that was mine. Like that was my big invitation to shift. There were many before that I missed, hence the fact that it got to a car accident that almost killed me, right? I ignored the featherlight touches. So Spirit was like, we need to shake this chick up because she's not listening. But, it can be very easy in the middle of divorce to say, why is this happening to me? but I love that you shared. And so you all, this very subtle shift that Declan just shared, whatever it is, if you're in the space of why is this happening to me, you don't have power. You're a victim. And when you don't have power, you cannot shift the circumstances or the experience you're having. And so very often we can't shift the circumstances, but we can always respond to a way that's more elevated, a way that has more expansion, a way that is more true to our essence. And if we're ever going to have a winning shot at shifting anything, we have to get out of victim mindset and we have to get into the creator. And that is, life is happening for me. And, when you imagine this divine presence, whatever your belief system, that is mine, there's a divine presence. Sometimes the way we are supported to get to where we're going, it takes an event or events that we certainly wouldn't have planned for. But in hindsight, you're like, well, damn, that definitely was the best way to get me over there, right?
Right on.
Yeah. And so I'm guessing where you're at, you're able to start seeing a lot with hindsight now, huh?
Absolutely. And then you can see the sacred nature of the things that you go through,
Yeah.
and you can live without regrets. I don't have to regret being with somebody for a long time. It was a gift to be in that relationship,
Yeah.
and a gift to be given the opportunity to move to a different space after that.
Yeah, you needed that relationship to become more you. You needed that relationship to be preparing for whatever the next relationship is going to bring.
Right.
And I love that. So you all, saying that hindsight is 2020 isn't a place to beat ourselves up and say, why couldn't I see it then? It's because hindsight's 2020. And that's where we can learn from it and say, oh, okay, how can it maybe go different next time? Yeah, and it's to learn from. It's not to say you did it wrong, it's to learn from. Thank you for that, Declan. Thank you for all of this.
Thanks, Jen. This was a great conversation. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, this is beautiful. And I'm I'm in the mindset of there are people out there right now who are looking to put their voice into the world more through writing, through art, through expression. And so thank you for being a model of that, because I believe that is going to be part of how we keep healing and expanding the collective. It's more people putting that into the fabric.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
So thank you for sharing a snippet of your bold journey. I know without a doubt, someone who needed to see this will see it. And so again, to our amazing viewers, if anyone is coming up to you as you're watching this, just a name, a face, please forward this on. I can't tell you how many people have seen the episode they needed to see, and it has been permission. It has normalized something they've been going through. It's invited them to get more curious, and that's the whole point. It's through sharing journeys and hearing others that we heal, that we become more free, and all of that good stuff. So, think of your people who might benefit from this, and go ahead and share it. You never know what it could create. And on that, once again, wherever you are, how you can connect Declan, if you want to say hi, if you want to read some of his beautiful poetry or whatnot, that will be there. And thank you for being with us. And we'll be back for another episode next week.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you
awesome.
again, Declan. Thank you for being a yes and being here with us.
Take care. Bye.